eventually into regions to deunify in a unified response to that edifice of power above, and at the bottom of that little lot come the people. That's what they want, because then people can sit around one table in the world government and dictate to that whole pyramid of power. So that's where they want to go, but just keep in mind that what this is really going on in the background. That's the physical expression of it. It's stopping people realizing their consciousness, pulling them into that, manipulating the virtual reality they decode, and therefore experience. Okay, once upon a virtual reality. This is one reality that leads us to where we are now. And I've got to go real quick through some of this because there's a hell of a lot of dots to connect in this section. Eons ago, there were, it seems, great landmasses, civilizations in the Atlantic and in the Pacific called Lemuria, or Mu, and the one in the Atlantic, Atlantis, which went down amid great cataclysmic events. Some people say around 11,500 years ago, some people say much further. And certainly when there's a great book called When the Earth Nearly Died, which I read many years ago, where these two writers and researchers put together the legends of people all over the world. I mean, the so-called Great Flood and all that stuff, it's not just in the Bible, it's in every culture in the world. And they put all those legends and descriptions of what happened alongside the geological and biological evidence which you can find around the earth, and they found that they correlated with incredible synchronicity. They told the same story of great cataclysmic events, and of course the most famous one is the story of Noah. But the story of Noah is just a rewrite of a story told thousands of years before, and indeed all around the world, where the Noah figure is given a different name in different cultures. So many of the Bible stories, the vast majority of them, are just much older stories which were rewritten. They put the new heroes, name for the heroes, and they put it in a different historical setting and time scale, but they were just the same stories. Before this great cataclysmic time, which I call the schism, if you look at the ancient accounts, they describe it as a golden age. It seems to be a time of harmony, and a time when the way that humans interacted with the world and each other and reality was very different. When, from our point of view, people lived for fantastic ages, and it was a time of harmony. And then came this, what I call the schism, which took many forms. And one seems to have been an energetic schism, which brought about this geological catastrophe, which brought an end to that very, very advanced civilization or civilizations called Mu and Atlantis, which appear to be in many, many ways further ahead, much further ahead technologically than we are now. And this energetic schism, and something else that I'll come to, a genetic schism, manipulation, changed the nature of life in this reality from one of harmony and connection, where we were in this world but not of it, to one where life changed and became very, very much more primitive. And if people think, well, evolution can't go back, it can only go forward. Well, imagine today if there were enormous geological events which made it impossible for us to have electricity or use oil and all these things we take for granted. Look at what happened in Louisiana after Hurricane Katrina. It was basically back to every man for themselves, a dog-eat-dog kind of existence for some time after that, because all those services we take for granted and things we take for granted disappeared. Imagine if you had a massive one on a virtually global scale, if not global scale, and that all that other stuff came to an end. It would go back to a kind of a primitive existence And then the memory of the very advanced time would just be a memory, and increasingly a memory, and it would just be carried in stories. And more that time, what we call time passed, this mind construct called time, they'd think it became like fantasy and just legend and, myth. That's what would happen now if it happened today. And in the Bible, it talks about the fall of man, and how suddenly life changed for humanity in this Garden of Eden. Now, we talk about the Garden of Eden in the Bible. The Garden of Eden is mentioned in tablets from Sumer, in what we call Iraq, thousands of years before Christianity. The Garden of Eden was just a rewrite of them. It goes back much further. Now, a lot of these very advanced Atlanteans and Lemurians or Muans moved out of those lands before and as a result of the cataclysmic events, and they located in other areas. And they took with them this advanced knowledge of reality and all the rest of it to these other lands, and it took on, it went in its own way. From that original one knowledge, it went into isolated areas as eventually the world recovered from the cataclysms, and it went off in its own way, but it was still the same basic knowledge. And some of the areas where, long after this cataclysmic time, advanced societies started to appear, these are some of them, and the knowledge reimplanted itself, but went off and was expressed in different ways. My friend, the Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa in South Africa, a couple of times he threw the bones for me. And throwing the bones, they're carved bones carved into symbols. And because everything is energy, when you carve something to represent something, or you make something to represent something, whether it's a picture or a symbol or whatever, it resonates to that energy field, to that frequency that it represents, because everything's energy, everything's consciousness. So when you put your hands over these bones in the basket before he throws them, what you're doing is connecting your energy field, which carries the blueprint of you, subconscious and conscious, into the energy fields of those bones. And where those bones are going to fall when he throws them in relationship to each other is already decided before they're thrown by the magnetic connections that have been made. And he throws them. And he reads where they are in relation to each other and all the rest of it, in terms of trying to read the future and all that. Whether you agree with that or not, that's not the point. But I thought when he did it, this is just throwing the rune stones in Europe. It's exactly the same thing. It's just picking out the tarot cards. The reason you pick out this tarot card and not that one is your magnetic field makes a connection to the magnetic field of that card, which represents a certain symbol, therefore a frequency, and you pull that one out and not that one because of that magnetic connection. Well, what I'm saying is, all over the world, there were different ways of expressing this knowledge, because now we had isolated societies, at least for a time, instead of the one society we had before. And this knowledge that came out of these advanced civilizations, that was the knowledge massively advanced, even from where we are now, some of it, that built these inexplicable, fantastic ancient structures. I mean, this is in Peru. These are hundreds of tons. You can't get a cigarette paper between them. I mean, what do they do? Latin, was it, on their back, pulled by ropes? I mean, what's going on here? It was fantastic what they did. These are the Nazca lines in Peru, where you can only see these depictions of animals and insects, which are all one line scored in the surface of the earth, at 1,000, 2,000 feet. And they were only seen in their entirety, when people started flying over them. So they were quite obviously, this very advanced knowledge in the ancient world. And some of it survived in some areas after the flood, the catastrophe. And these are some of the early states of the old world. They call it the old world, but actually it was the world recovering after the cataclysmic events. And this area of Mesopotamia is particularly important to the story I'm going to tell. And in these areas, and in many other areas, in fact, if you really go into it, every other area of the world, they tell a story which is